The defense budget for fiscal year 2021 will total $716 billion. That's down 2.2% from fiscal 2020. Seamus Daniels is program manager and research associate at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. He and his colleague Todd Harrison are out with their annual defense budget analysis. Seamus, welcome. Thanks for coming on. Is the fact that the budget is down and that we and you anticipate shrinking budgets in out years the main takeaway that people should focus on right now?
Francis, thanks for having me. I think the basic takeaway from the FY 2021 request is that the administration projected that the top line for both the DoD budget and the total national defense budget would remain flat through FY 25, and that's remained flat with inflation. Now, the interesting thing is that was back in February when they released the budget, and they're projecting that flat top line even as the Budget Control Act caps expire after FY 21. Now, obviously, after a number of COVID relief packages and potentially more, CBO projects that the total deficit for FY 20 could total somewhere near $4 trillion. So we should expect to see even greater downward pressure on the defense budget.
And one of the potential challenges there is something that you and I have talked about before, and Todd and I have been talking about since we've been talking a decade or more, and that is this passage. The MILPERS, the military personnel budget in FY 21, is 4.6% higher, adjusting for inflation, than it was in 2020, yet the total active duty military is only 1% larger, with virtually no net change in the size of the Guard and Reserve. If that trend continues, this is going to force some pretty dramatic choices in 21, 22, and beyond. Is that fair to say?
You're absolutely correct, Francis. Well, the long-term trends that we've been seeing is that the MILPERS, the military personnel part of the budget, has been growing significantly over time. And it's increasing year in, year out, especially as you have pay raises, which then multiply down the line. And it's not only the military personnel part of the budget, but operations and maintenance, O&M, is also going up year after year. So what that is doing is essentially crowding out other parts of the budget, like acquisition programs that are focusing on modernization, which is a major priority under the National Defense Strategy.
I don't see anything to indicate that you and Todd are suggesting that military personnel don't deserve pay increases, so that's not the issue. One of the things that struck me in your work here is you and Todd write, while history's not a reliable predictor of the future, it's helpful for understanding the range of plausible outcomes. What are those plausible outcomes that you think people should be paying attention to, Seamus?
Well, when Todd and I are referring to history there, we're looking at it in the context of fiscal and economic trends. And so what we've seen in the past is that we've seen downturns in the defense budget following historically high deficits. So a lot of people believe that there was a downturn in the defense budget at the end of the Cold War. That actually happened about 5 years earlier in the mid-1980s under Reagan, in which there was a historically high deficit and we see a downturn in the defense budget. Again, we can fast forward to 2008, Francis, with the 2008 recession. That prompted another major downturn. So obviously, there's a lot still up in the air, and it could depend on the 2020 election and the outcome of who controls the chambers in Congress to see how serious Congress is going to take the deficit and what its impact is going to be on defense spending.
Well, and it strikes me that in another passage here, you allude to the broader economy separate and apart from political issues. You write, political environment could shift markedly once an economic recovery is underway in fiscal 22 or 23. That's assuming that the economy is able to open based on events surrounding COVID. Is that what you're alluding to there?
Yeah, I think there are a number of factors that we're alluding to. Obviously, whether the economy reopens, but also looking at different stimulus packages and their ultimate impact on the deficit, given that. But ultimately, Francis, it comes back to Congress and whether Congress and at what point Congress decides to start tackling the deficit.
About 2 minutes left, Seamus, and the big chunk here for me was this passage. DoD can preserve strategic maneuver space by preparing for a drawdown now, but the longer these preparations are delayed, the narrower the range options available will become. That means start now to think about what 23, 25, and 30 look like. Is that too far out to think about this, Seamus?
No, I don't think it is, Francis. What we've seen, especially when we're looking at pending or coming defense cuts, is that DoD needs to start the preparation early. They need to start communicating with Congress early to make sure their priorities are saved when Congress decides to take action and eventually cut the defense budget to reduce the deficit. We saw back before sequestration in 2013, DoD didn't prepare. So we see across the board cuts, which really negatively impact DoD. So they need to start having the conversations now. They need to start planning now, because the longer they wait to make cuts and to plan, the more painful those cuts are going to be.
Should that, about 30 seconds left, Seamus, should that discussion be happening at the programmatic level in what they keep and what they get rid of? Should that be happening at the service level, the enterprise-wide level, or all of the above?
I think when we're talking about implementing the strategy and prioritizing modernization, that has to happen at the department level, at the service level, and then it'll filter down, obviously, to the programmatic level. But they really need to target saving those modernization priorities that the department has really honed in on as necessary to implement the NDS.
Seamus Daniels, thanks as always. Great to have you back.
Thanks, Francis.